Push that big
All
button.
right.
Come on,
push that
Milkshake.
big
I got to
button.
push several buttons here.
No, Roz is being piloted by a cat now.
This is
Cat
true.
Gundam.
Milkshake is basically taken over this podcast.
Cat Gundam. Yeah.
You've Cat Gellion.
Yeah, he's sitting. He's got his rear paws on my chest, and his front paws are on the table. And if I try and use the mouse, he just sort of bats it away.
Perfect.
You deserve nothing.
So that's my situation. How's everyone else doing?
I have a laptop that's 3/4 on the desk, a double White Russian, a latte, and a Detroit style DiGiorno
It's
pizza.
9 a.m., my guy.
I had to be ready.
It's the weekend. You're podcasting. You have to have a beverage.
I have a beverage. Don't worry about me.
All right. It's a bonus episode. You know who we are, but we have a guest.
Yeah, why are we here?
Why are we here?
Why are we here?
We're here because of my sins. I'm James Gilboy, pronouns he, they, and you may remember me from Project Plowshare, but we're not talking about nukes today. We're talking about drugs, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about drugs.
We're talking about drugs.
Let's talk about some drugs.
And unfortunately, we have no November. November,
Yeah.
if you will.
November,
Yeah.
if you will. Yeah.
The
Which is kind
November.
of
Yeah.
This is not going to be a funny episode. We're going to get through this and post it.
Yeah,
Leave
exactly.
us alone.
Exactly. It's gonna be very workmanlike. There's
Very
gonna be
facts.
no jokes, only facts. Facts only.
Only facts.
yeah.
Only. Yeah, we're going to start a subscription service called Only Facts.
Yeah. I blame Trash Future for this, for having live shows.
Nova is currently indisposed and baby dead.
Possibly.
Kind of a disappointment because she would have some amazing drops for this, but
Got
Yeah, we don't have any drops, so
taken
we're
out
just going to
by
have to
the,
improvise them.
taken out by the Carrington event ongoing.
That you stayed up too late because you were excited for it.
Yeah, I was hoping all the electronics would explode and we wouldn't have to do this.
Oh, too bad. You're here. I'm here.
Unfortunately.
all right. So the question we have to ask first is, what are drugs? Next slide.
What are drugs?
What are drugs?
Oh yeah, real quick.
I don't like that you use Drexel University College of Medicine as a source.
I thought there'd be a reaction to that.
Was it Roz? Was it them or the law school that got like decertified?
The law
lost its
school.
licensure
The law school
temporarily?
got
This is
decertified.
the law school.
Yeah. And also they took the guy's name off of it because he didn't donate enough.
Yeah.
Pay to win, but for academia, I don't know.
Yes.
You don't pay to win when you're going to Drexel, man. You pay to lose.
So the reason why
Ain't
this
that
is
the truth?
up at all is because we're on the sources page that I'm opening with. I started writing this script before the H Bomber Guy video dropped, and I made sure to save everything that was still open in my tabs. So I'm confident that everything in here is somewhere in these. However, sorting out where I got the individual pieces of info may be a little bit more difficult. Anyway, I think next slide so we can actually start answering the drugs question. So,
Is this lion gonna fuck me?
I'm
Looks
sure
like
if you pay enough.
I could. Yeah. We got podcast money. I can
Dare to,
Yeah.
I don't know, take Lion Red Rocket.
dare to ream.
Don't cats have spiky penises? Okay, that's...
I
Yeah, I believe so.
okay, wait.
Milkshake, come here.
No, he just left. Also,
Right.
he is spayed and neutered.
Oh yeah, so it's Toby. So I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you.
I'm glad you said it and not me. Okay. Drugs. A drug at large is any substance consumed for its physiological or psychological effects, physical or mental. We've got pharmaceutical drugs, antipsychotics and such. But of course, like humans first would have encountered recreational ones like caffeine and ethanol, which we just more colloquially call alcohol.
That's a good one. I like that one.
That's the good
It's
one.
pretty popular. Although even it's not legal in all places of the world.
We must liberate the oppressed peoples and give them a fifth of Old Crow.
Also, physiologically, it's probably one of the worst ones.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's real bad
yeah.
for you.
It's like one of those carcinogens where there's zero threshold for safety, sort of like nitrates in cured meat. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Oh no, those are good for you because they taste good.
Yeah, no, like I'll just eat them anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, shit.
Love,
I will be right back. I just need to close
charcuterie board and a glass of wine, equivalent to
that.
standing.
How did you say that word?
Charcuterie.
Okay.
Yeah. A charcuterie board and a glass of wine is the same effect as standing 6 feet from
19 cigarettes.
Yeah, 19 cigarettes standing next to the Chernobyl elephant's foot.
You know, having a taste for charcuterie is why I was banned from SeaWorld. Anyway, there are also drugs that we used to use, as recreational or medicinal, but we've stopped because better options came along, or side effects outweigh the benefits, or they're just too dangerous, like strychnine, which was used as a stimulant for a while, but we now only use it for killing mice.
What's this, steroid? What's that, steroid?
Strychnine.
Strychnine.
Yeah, however it's pronounced.
Yeah.
It's what they gave that guy in the St. Louis
the
Olympics marathon.
right? Yeah.
One of everyone's favorite John Boy's videos.
Yes.
So there's a huge range of classes of drugs, stimulants, depressants, barbiturates, far more than I could ever name, much less pronounce. What we're most interested in is a group known as, next slide.
Oh boy. Oh, I've seen this in my nightmares.
Psychedelics. So this is, I don't believe it's a pharmaceutical term. It's just it's like kind of an umbrella that encompasses.
Just like a catch-all?
Yeah, kind of, because psychedelics actually belong to a very broad range of drug classes. They were originally called hallucinogens. Some of them are also now called entheogens for their spiritual importance, but they're all broadly united by what their effects are. The word psychedelic was invented in 1956 by a psychiatrist as a portmanteau of Greek words meaning mind manifesting, which is not really very descriptive because the psychedelic experience as a whole is often characterized as ineffable or hard to explain. Our understanding and way of communicating it has improved over the years, but we still don't actually know how they work for the most part. Next slide. What we do know is that the serotonergic psychedelics bind to the...
Does it say blast your 5-HT2 AOC? Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm fucking down for that.
5-HT2 AOC. Yes. So serotonergic psychedelics means they bind to the brain's serotonin receptors, specifically, as we were just mentioning, the 5-HT2A receptors. What that means, I couldn't tell you. I'm not a neuroscientist. But we do know that this suppresses activity.
Yeah, don't get mad at us for that, by the way. We
every time I see one of these illustrations of like a protein or whatever in the molecules, the organic molecules in the body, I'm like, how can anyone understand that?
Yeah, especially with how it's so swirly. So we do know that these suppress activity in the brain's default mode network and increase communication between different areas of the brain. Basically, they change the way you think, the way you feel, the way you perceive anything. It all changes radically in ways, depending on substance, but who you're with, where you are, your mental health, maybe even what you ate that day. So like taking mushrooms isn't like drinking a 6-pack of beer, as anybody who has done both would know. With a beer, you know exactly what you're in for.
Yes.
And that's misery at the end of the 6th one because you're going to throw up. But with the mushrooms, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. You might get some oversaturated colors and feel this profound sense of connection with the people around you. You might experience deep introspection. You might watch a light show go on inside your eyes, or you may completely lose your own sense of identity. In something that's called ego death, or I think also depersonalization is a close second there.
I just felt really happy and had made some good posts and also cooked some delicious food.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes you wake up on a beach with no memory of who you are. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems like a good like premise for a TV show or something. So yeah, also you might have a psychotic break, but we'll get to that. It's all over the place. Subjective note thing. So as somebody who's not a neuroscientist, my speculation for why I think trips are hard to describe is because of how they work in our brains. I mentioned the bonding with serotonin receptors. They're hacking into our brains through where our neurotransmitters are, normally supposed to go. Neurotransmitters, just being simple chemicals our body uses to send signals, regulate mood, all that. So explaining being on acid would be kind of like explaining to an alien what being happy is like. It's like it's something we as people kind of innately.
Do you guys know what beer is? Okay, so you drink.
Yeah.
You guys know when you built the pyramids, right? How good you felt after that?
Yeah.
I paid the aliens in beer.
Yeah.
Never consider that.
How would you describe, say, having beer to somebody who's lived in a dry country their whole life? It's like, no, man, you just got to experience it.
It's the tastiest beverage you could have. And also, it'll get you in a lot of trouble if you're not careful.
Yes.
Well, even if you are careful, depends. So we're not going to get too far into the weeds on that, but we do have to go a little further to get to where we're going. Next slide. Oh, that says
boy.
it's supposed to say do not boof the boofo. Yeah, that's not how that's taken.
Well, this is how PowerPoint messes with us all.
Yeah. PowerPoint or Google, whatever.
Yeah.
So psychedelics actually have a centuries, if not millennia long history of human use outside of Western culture, not so much in it. 3 of the 4, quote, classic psychedelics, as they're known, are naturally occurring and have been used by various groups around the world for longer than anyone has bothered to keep track. There are cave paintings in Algeria that may be 9,000 years old showing what we believe to be use of magic mushrooms.
What? Wow. That's fucking sick.
Yeah, there's this really...
That's so cool.
There's this really interesting thing with... I'm going to say ancient India, and I mean like within the last few thousand years, there are all these artistic depictions of some sort of drug or sacrament called soma, and we don't actually know what it is. There are some theories, but I was going to say that red mushroom with white spots on its cap, the Mario mushroom you see up top there, that is not a magic mushroom. That is an amanita. I Googled Amanita muscaria. There's a bunch of varieties. It's the Mario mushroom. It's the one from Alice in Wonderland. They are technically toxic, but they can be made safe. They also have a long history of medicinal use. They're supposed to be really tasty if you cook them right.
They make you twice as high. Tall, I mean.
They do screw with your perception.
Why not both?
Yeah.
High, tall, same thing.
Yeah. High, tall. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's when I play basketball.
What's the weather like up there?
I am taller than James. How tall are you, bud?
We're doing this again.
I say 6 foot in my tender.
Okay, yeah, we're doing height discourse again.
I'm terrible at basketball, and I'll just yield that.
I'm also terrible at basketball.
You're taller, so you're better than me.
I haven't played basketball in so long, so I don't know. I might be really good at it.
I don't think that I love you to death, right? I do. You're my favorite person, but I've seen you try to do stuff that's coordinated, and you're not so good at it.
Yeah, coordination's overrated.
That's right, baby. Just Roz trying to remember how to operate his arms and legs.
Look,
this is why I'm also like shit at RuneScape. I can't click with any accuracy.
Sometimes the ratatouille in my hat, gets confused.
Just piloting you like a
rat Eva. Rat Eva versus cat Eva. My mom had a cat named Eva, actually, and it just died a couple weeks ago.
It's a shame. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, mescaline, which is a substance made by some cacti, most known to occur in peyote, but is also in the much more common, legal, and fast-growing San Pedro or Peruvian torch, is shown in the slide. It's believed to have been used for at least 2,000 years. Meanwhile, ayahuasca, which is a DMT-containing brew, is known to have been prepared for at least 1,000 years. I I want to say, and there's no good way to drop this reference, but ayahuasca is some very potion seller shit because it's supposed to be known for making you throw up.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Just like kratom.
Kratom, I've heard like is effectively an opioid in your body, so it's very common to develop dependencies on it. So I don't want to touch that shit myself. The fourth of these is not naturally occurring, but is synthesized from it. Next slide. So I want to hear you both try to pronounce that. Liam first.
Lysergic acid diethylamide.
Yeah, it's lysergic acid diethylamide.
There we go.
Yeah.
Very close, though, on Liam's part. And yeah, like close enough that nobody...
Yeah, fuck you!
I figure you have to pronounce the ethyl. It's got ethyls in it.
Oh, God. It's a drug that it makes us all stupid.
Yeah, look, it's got a whole benzene, too.
Oh, no.
Love benzene.
Yeah, everyone loves benzene.
Mm-hmm. It's famously good for you on its own.
Yeah.
Gotta get that pure stuff.
I forget if that one's the benzene or if this one's the benzene. I haven't taken organic chemistry in a long time.
So, LSD was first created on November 16th, 1938 at Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland. A chemist named Albert Hofmann was trying to produce new analeptics, or central nervous system stimulants. These include stuff like strychnine, mentioned above, however you pronounce that, but also amphetamines, including meth, which, as we know, Nazis love.
Neat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've heard some criticisms of that, like, what is it, Blitzed, that book? I don't know what they are, but it's still a very fun book to read.
Meth chocolate, baby. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. You've seen the Steve video of him, like, trying some of that out?
Yeah. I mean, the algorithm's not going to like this video, but that guy actually did meth in his YouTube video.
It's a bonus episode.
He is Florida Man incarnate, but in a good way. So Hoffman was fucking around with some lysergic acid, which is one of the building blocks of ergotamine, I don't know how it's pronounced, and other alkaloids made by the ergot fungus. You guys have probably heard of this. It causes ergotism by infecting grains, mainly rye, which can cause convulsions, gangrene, and other symptoms if consumed. But just like we use botulinum for cosmetic surgery now, we found that in small doses, it could be used for stopping like postpartum bleeding.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, we stopped because side effects and all that, and better alternatives came along. But Hoffman had figured out how to make the active useful ingredient, ergotamine, in a lab. He was also playing with making similar molecules that he hoped could have medical uses. Next slide. That's the guy.
That is the face of a maniac.
PowerPoint messed this one up too.
Oh well. I mean,
hold on.
Oh no,
he died at 102. Good Lord.
We'll get to his life. But the text in the background says, "I can only show that molecule so many times." Lol. So the 25th of his experiments was a combination between ergotamine and diethylamine. It was labeled LSD-25 for lab tests. It didn't really work as anybody hoped. The animal testing only resulted in the test subjects becoming restless. Normally, what would happen when tests went nowhere like this is the formula would be thrown out and forgotten. Nobody would ever give a shit ever again. But Hoffman, quote, liked the chemical structure, unquote, and held on to the formula because he thought there was more potential than they first saw. So, like, he did that thing with, like, Donkey did at the start of Shrek, and he's like, I like that molecule. That's a nice molecule.
That's a good molecule. That's fucking funny.
Hoffman had always been kind of eccentric. He had initially thought about studying the humanities and becoming an artist. But he ended up going into chemistry not because he was going to take some hardline rational view of the world, but because he wanted to explain the mystical experiences he had as a kid. Quote, mystical experiences in childhood in which nature was altered in magical ways had provoked questions concerning the essence of the external material world, and chemistry was a scientific field which might afford insights into this, unquote. I bring that up because next slide.
Hey, bicycle day.
Oh yeah,
You love bicycles.
oh yes, bicycles are good. Period. About 5 years later, in April 1943, Hoffman out of nowhere had, quote, a peculiar presentiment, unquote, that he should recreate LSD 25 and continue studying it. His lab safety, though, evidently wasn't great because he accidentally absorbed an unknown amount of the substance which hadn't been tested on humans before. He only found this out when he was, quote, interrupted in my work by unusual sensations, unquote.
Wow.
I love to be interrupted in my work by unusual sensations.
Yeah, in the chemistry lab on
Oh, yeah.
LSD.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy!
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah! Oh boy! What am I doing with my hands?
Well, so like, remember, this is in the West before anybody had ever, really understood psychedelics. So he felt kind of dizzy, restless, and sensitive to light. He went straight home. He lay down on his couch in, quote, in a dreamlike state with eyes closed. I perceived an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense kaleidoscopic play of colors. Unquote. Next slide. Obviously, being a scientist, his first reaction to this is, I need to do it again for science, or whatever the technical term is.
Yes.
Doing it again for science.
On April 19th, 1943, I think maybe I was supposed to say on the last slide there, but that's fine. No. Yeah. Anyway, same day as the Warsaw Uprising, April 19th, 1943, he dosed himself with 1/4 milligram of LSD. That's 200 and...
Oh boy!
Wait, no, don't react yet.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Audience, that is 250 micrograms. And let's put that into perspective. You can get energy drinks these days that have 300 milligrams of caffeine. Your like strong ibuprofens are going to have like 100 milligrams, maybe 200. So like, those are like in the range of 1,000 times the active ingredient that Hoffman took. Like this is a very conservative dose in theory. What we later found out, though, is that LSD is ludicrously powerful and in some circumstances can be felt in doses of less than 25 micrograms. Hoffman had already made history with the world's first acid trip, and he was going to make history again with the world's first bad acid trip.
Oh boy.
As it comes on, he gets uneasy and eventually descends into what he thinks is irreversible madness. He thinks he's poisoned himself, and thoughts on acid come-ups tend to be kind of self-fulfilling prophecies. If you think, oh, I'm having a bad time, yes, you are. He gets some help from his lab assistant getting home on a bike, which is why April 19th is now Bicycle Day.
You imagine being that lab assistant?
Yeah, that would be that'd be interesting. I mean, it's like wartime Switzerland. Like they didn't have gas, which is why they rode the bike. It's being rationed.
Yeah, and I mean, the incredible potency is why, hey kids, you want to pull a fun prank? Synthesize a gallon of LSD and throw it in a reservoir.
Oh, Jesus.
Ross.
Please no, do not do this.
To quote Joe Kasabian, hold that thought. Okay, not literally, but not far off there. So he said, quote, familiar objects and pieces of furniture assumed grotesque, threatening forms. They were in continuous motion, animated as if driven by an inner restlessness, unquote. He underwent ego death and said, quote, a demon had invaded me, had taken possession of my body, mind, and soul. I jumped up and screamed, trying to free myself from him, but then sank down again and lay helpless on the sofa, unquote. Finally, the doctor arrived and checked his vitals. They were all completely normal, and the only obvious symptom was dilated pupils. And like as soon as Hoffman heard this, like it completely changed the character of the trip because of like how suggestible you are on psychedelics. Like if somebody tells you you're okay, you're gonna feel better. He eventually came down into what he called and has been since called an afterglow. Quote, everything glistened and sparkled in a fresh light. The world was as if newly created. All my senses vibrated in a condition of the highest sensitivity, which persisted for the entire day, unquote. So this would have been after many hours because LSD lasts a long time. Depending on the dose, 8 to 18 hours, sometimes more on the extreme end, and it interferes with your sleep. According to a study published in Cell Press in 2017, because I'm getting this citation right, this is because
Well done.
this is because LSD makes a serotonin receptor, or the 5-HT2A OC as we know it, fold in on itself like a lid. The receptor and LSD are eventually kind of pulled into the cell to be broken down, which I guess is kind of why you feel weird afterward because the receptor isn't there. Something that I want to add is you can get some really, really good replications of psychedelic visuals from a YouTube channel called Symmetric Vision. It's the most realistic depiction I've ever seen. It's still not quite, as good as the real thing, but if you want to see what, being on acid really looks like, go check out that YouTube channel.
I would assume you'd prefer to also have the other effects as well as the visuals.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the visuals are neat. They are better in combination with the others. Next slide. Big sip. Hoffman came to believe that LSD had found him, and that these events are now held in reverence within the psychedelic community just because they're so weird. He also believed the drug could be useful for studying schizophrenia and psychosis. In the In the early days, LSD was marketed by Sandoz as a drug called Delicid, like you see on the screen. They called it a psychotomimetic because they thought it could simulate psychosis. This became a big field of study in the 1950s. It was used in psychiatry, psychoanalysis, and experimentation with the arts. There were hundreds of papers written, dozens of books, international conferences. Acid and other psychedelics were considered a new frontier of psychiatric study. This, I believe, was the decade that Time magazine did its article on, these mushrooms that make you have visions from Mexico, which ultimately kind of fucking ruined Mexican Village. But one of the major customers for LSD in 1953 was, next slide, a group called the Central Intelligence Agency.
I've heard of these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know these
I've
guys.
heard bad things. And we're about to hear more bad things because they were doing something called Project MK Ultra. The CIA bought the world's entire supply of LSD at this time. They wanted to know if it could be used for mind control or interrogation.
How much was the world's entire supply?
I did not. Either I didn't write that down or it wasn't documented. It's more likely that I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
But probably enough to dose millions upon millions of people.
I'm just thinking this is like a water bottle full.
Oh, like the world supply of antimatter?
Yeah.
So we're going to speed run this part because the CIA inflicted an unbelievable amount of psychological trauma on people. It gave LSD without conformed consent to CIA employees, government agents, members of the military, doctors, and civilians violating the Nuremberg Code. It gave a mental patient in Kentucky LSD for 174 days straight.
That's too much.
Fuck it. Let's see what happens.
More than one is too much, but I believe that's also how one of the members of Pink Floyd cracked. His bandmates were just slipping into his coffee every day or something.
Oh no, don't like that.
Yeah, okay, that's anecdotal. I did not look that up and verify it. The CIA was dosing people and interrogating them for hours under bright lights. This apparently caused multiple suicides. They coerced heroin addicts into taking LSD for more heroin. They dosed random people who didn't know they were being drugged. Apparently, unexpected acid trips have been described as an occupational hazard of working for the CIA at the time.
So someone just did it as a prank. It's just a prank, bro. It's just a prank.
It's just a prank, bro. And you're
Shake hands with danger. Yeah. There were some bad reactions to this.
forklift operator in the back of Langley. It's just
going absolutely fucking nuts. Yeah.
So one guy thought he was surrounded by monsters and sprinted across DC in fear for his life. And then there's a version of this one that's more well known but is mischaracterized. So you guys have heard the story about a guy taking acid and jumping out of a window to kill himself, right?
Yeah.
That's not really how it happened. So that guy was bioweapons chemist Frank Olson, who was questioning the morality of his work, allegedly, and tried to leave the CIA. He was dosed and, not with his consent. And then he later died from a fall out of a 13th floor window from a New York City hotel 9 days later. Olson supposedly had diagnosed suicidal tendencies, but his family believes he was murdered for speaking out. His body was exhumed in 1994, and he was found to have sustained cranial injuries before his fall. I believe there's also records of other CIA employees being at that hotel at the time. The family received a $750,000 settlement, which to me is sort of an admission of guilt.
More or less an admission of guilt. Yeah.
So the CIA murdered a guy for feeling bad about being part of the bioweapons program. And Donald Ewan Cameron, which is not a name I know but might ring a bell for somebody, carried out experiments on Canadians using LSD for the CIA during this time. The CIA eventually gave up on acid because it doesn't really work as a mind-control drug. It actually made people harder to control in some situations. More on that in a bit. Next slide.
That was always like my understanding is like, okay, we're gonna do like we're gonna break people and build them back up, and it turns out no, LSD just makes them weirder. LSD, LCD,
LED.
No,
drugs you've never heard of.
We'll get to those.
Yeah.
I've got to get that liquid crystal display. Next slide.
Yes.
So, take another big sip. The CIA's experimentation was not really scientific. Whereas the world of science...
really?
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
I'm sure that's a big surprise to all of you. But the world of science outside was actually making some breakthroughs. Because LSD caused some psychosis-like effects, scientists went looking for the chemical causes and learned that neurotransmitters are a thing and that many mental disorders aren't psychological. LSD was at the time seen as a wonder drug that could cure anxiety, depression, OCD, alcoholism. One study in the late 50s involved giving LSD to members of Alcoholics Anonymous who'd failed to quit drinking. The success rate was 50%, which sounds low, but it apparently hasn't been beaten by any treatments since then.
That 50% is not bad at all. I mean,
yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, personally, since taking LSD the first time, I drink much more rarely. I'm having a double White Russian right now, but I often drink less than 1 day a week now. After having a fixation on craft spirits for a bit. Anyway, that was...
Oh, that was a mistake.
Oh, no, I have a great liquor cabinet still. I've got a fucking amazing barrel-proof rye. Anyway, AA founder Bill Wilson actually wanted to introduce LSD as a stage of the recovery plan for a bit. But the controls of these studies were not great by modern standards. The excited researchers, they got carried away and they kind of skewed their own results. A lot of psychiatrists were taking it recreationally and sharing it with friends, including, next slide.
Wait, I have a question here.
Yes.
13 normal subjects.
How normal?
How normal are they? How normal are these people?
I mean, it was like the 50s, so either they're hiding not being normal or they're just the dullest people you've ever met.
We got a bunch of Presbyterians in here, and
Protestants.
Okay.
We gave LSD to church ladies. Here's what we found.
I'd spend $39.5 million on that.
We'll touch on that in a second. Not in that sense, but anyway, this fucking guy, as the slide says, is Harvard psychologist Timothy Leary. Leary was at the head of the 1960s Harvard psilocybin project, where they did a lot of experimentation with mushrooms. He was a loose cannon, to say the least. His study finding psilocybin use reduced prisoner recidivism by 90%. Was later found to be way off. Like the real number was 2%. You talked about giving acid to church ladies. Well, Leary's Good Friday experiment involved giving divinity students psilocybin. This has also been historically mischaracterized. The book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan has a lot of really good insight into this era of experimentation. Some of the students had mystical experiences, like life-changing ones, but some had serious anxiety, and one sprinted off to declare the coming of the Messiah.
Oh boy.
Leary was known for being fast and loose with who he gave psilocybin and LSD to. And this, or just missing his lectures, was why he ended up getting fired in 1963. He went rogue and ended up getting funded by the Mellon heirs of Carnegie Mellon University and continuing his, quote, research, unquote, in a mansion in Millbrook, New York. What went down seems to be a mix of earnest, if flawed, research and fuck tons of partying.
Good for him.
Yeah. Well, you may
That's
not
the way
be.
to do it. You have my psychedelic party mansion in upstate New York.
I mean, yes, but also you may not be as enthused by him in a few minutes. This guy had an appetite for media attention, and he popularized the phrase turn on, tune in, drop out. He tried to get LSD classified as a sacrament for this like church of LSD or whatever it was. That didn't work out. While all this was going on, there was more military experimentation that I want to segue into just because it's funny. Next slide. So the Edgewood Arsenal experience were a fucking huge mess. There's all sorts of unethical testing with weapons. There's a ton of lawsuits. Just listen to the Lines Led by Donkeys episode about how horrible what was going on there was.
Is that Edgewood, Maryland?
I don't actually know. I just know the name of the arsenal.
Okay.
I would imagine. Edgewood. That's what I was doing last night. Anyway.
Well done.
So they did some LSD experiments there, though. They were filmed and they were incredibly funny. There's footage of this one and the other one I'm about to mention there on the right. They're available on YouTube. You can go watch them and skip my summary, but so you've got like this drill sergeant who's trying to drill soldiers on acid and they just can't do it. They're losing cohesion. They're laughing their asses off. And then they switched the drill sergeant out for one who was on acid. And, he's just as gone as the rest of them.
Fucking Arlie Ermy on acid.
Oh, God.
So he was told by the commanding officer to drill them. And he said, quote, "You want to drill? You drill them," unquote. And they told him to leave. And he was like, no, I got this. But he didn't. The whole thing was a bust. It like the whole video is played off as, the sort of like grim 50s or 60s, like, oh, don't do this. Like, oh, look how unhappy they are. And like, you just see dudes who look like they're a bunch of Boy Scouts who snuck a joint with them to camp. Like they're having a great fucking time.
They're fantastic
It's a
time.
grand old time. Yeah.
If you've done acid, I can only like demand you watch this, because when you do, you're like, oh, I know where they are. And they're having the time of their fucking lives. In 1964, the British military experimented with LSD too. They tried doing this field exercise, but it just fell entirely apart. One guy had a bad trip. He had to be taken away. But the rest, what is going on in my head? I'm mispronouncing everything. But the rest,
LSD.
no, actually, I considered it for this episode, but like it might make reading hard.
Yeah.
But the rest just kind of gradually lost their ability to follow orders. One guy tried to cut down a tree with a shovel and almost succeeded. Another one just kind of fucks off and climbs a tree. There's footage of it. Completely disables a military unit. So Clearly, LSD has no potential military application, and this seems to be about the end of the line for experimentation for it there.
What's your major malfunction, Private? Sir, bad trip, sir.
Just take your standard issue Xanax.
Yeah.
So, LSD is also about to have some trouble in the civilian world. Next slide. I'm going to take another big sip, so Devin's going to have to edit this out.
I also took that opportunity to have another big sip of the Yard's very mega Imperial IPA.
Well done.
Yeah.
I did not have any taste for IPAs until I moved to the Northwest, and now it just feels kind of appropriate.
Yeah.
Normal.
I mean, I think problem with IPAs is they all got the same, you know. Once they started doing the hazy bullshit. This is a non-hazy IPA, which I like.
They all kind of taste like earwax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say that derogatively, but like also, yeah.
Well, I like them.
Well, I mean, also, I'm probably going to have one at some point. Not today, but I will. So, Leary up there in the top left, he was gaining profile this whole time as a champion and distributor of LSD. In 1964, he married Uma Thurman's mom, who divorced him a year later. 1965 was when psychedelics started getting pretty ubiquitous in American counterculture. The Beatles did LSD for the first time that year. I have a note that says we should make all boy bands do LSD.
I probably would make them better. Yeah. I mean, if you could get like the Jonas Brothers on like acid or like, I don't know any other NSYNC,
BTS.
Who's like contemporary right now? Like K-pop bands, give them all
back
acid.
One Direction.
Yeah.
Bring back One Direction just to give them
every direction.
Yeah. Several directions.
Directions you've never heard of.
Gone from one direction to several vector quantities.
Going our own way, and it's just like a trippy cover of Fleetwood Mac. So we all know they deal with hippies and deadheads, but rather than just throw out stereotypes, I want to quote a passage from How to Change Your Mind Again. Quote, Hoffman also came to regard the youth's culture... I'm fucking this up. The youth culture's adoption of LSD in the 1960s as an understandable response to the emptiness of what he described as a materialist, industrialized, and spiritually impoverished society that had lost connection to nature. Unquote.
No one can appreciate the Great Society.
I mean, I was just sort of gonna... Okay, I'll just say it. Capitalism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're building you the Washington Metro. What more do you want?
Look, it's brown.
Okay, speaking of brown and of public transit architecture, the fucking DIA redesign is terrible. I grew up going through that airport going, wow, this is kind of a weirdly ugly building, but I fuck with it. You know, it's got this like mishmash of like, what is it, granite or whatever floors.
Which DIA are we talking about?
Denver International Airport.
Denver International. Are they doing something new? That's a conspiracy theory thing.
Lucifer.
Okay, as somebody who doesn't actually know what this means, because I only listened to the audio of the Calatrava episode, like it's becoming like every single other international airport out there. It's just now this massive white and windows and boring signs.
Yeah, airport architecture has gone way downhill in like the
past
like,
was amazing.
40 years.
It's this like disastrously weird like 80s time capsule, and they're just taking all the character out of it. Anyway,
like,
no.
You're never going to get Eero Saarinen back to do like a Dulles International Airport terminal or something like that. You know,
can't have anything nice.
Yeah, give me brushed aluminum or give me death.
I was all excited to fly out of what Lambert in St. Louis. And it's like, no, you're coming out of Terminal 2 because you're flying Southwest. You're not going to see the nice modernist Yamasaki terminal. You're going to fly out of Schlock.
You deserve nothing and you'll get nothing.
So in 1966, the FDA starts pushing back against LSD by sending letters to 2,000 universities warning of its supposed dangers. Sandoz stops making the stuff. Leary told Playboy he had, quote, cured, unquote, a lesbian with LSD.
Oh,
He
boy.
later recanted this.
So I don't think that's how that works.
No, that does.
If anything, you're going to make
happen.
them more lesbian.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Turbo lesbian.
So Leary ran for office, and John Lennon wrote him a campaign jingle. This was later turned into the song Come Together. All this is getting LSD some pretty bad press. So despite the medical world still seeing promise, you've got a public that's rapidly turning against it. Next slide.
Oh my God, people are enjoying themselves. We can't have this.
Not in a Puritan society, no. So throughout the early 60s, there's this gradual emphasis in the mass media about negatives of LSD. I say mass media because I think there is a distinction there between mass media and mainstream media. But that's a diatribe for another time. About the negatives of LSD. Most of them were outright fabrications or mischaracterizations of things that actually happened. There were stories of students trying to eat the bark off trees, a guy who thought he was an orange and didn't want people near him because they thought they'd juice him, that it gets stuck in your spine and you have a trip every time you crack your back. I heard that one growing up, yeah. Harvard even disseminated disinformation packets calling it, quote, drug roulette, unquote, that could cause psychotic breakdown. On October 6th of, I did not write what year that was. God damn, it must be 1966 because that's the last one I put down. President Lyndon Baines Jumbo is what I wrote.
Jumbo. Lyndon Baines Jumbo.
Okay.
He's thrilled at his grave, I'll tell you that right now.
I forgot writing that, so I just tripped myself up. October 6th of, I might have that year entirely wrong. October 6th of some year in the second half of the 60s. Jumbo signs a ban on LSD. Yeah, he docked the pen in and signed it.
You don't appreciate the Great Society? No more LSD. Sorry.
Yeah, you get nothing.
All you're getting is nice metro systems in several U.S. cities and the Vietnam War.
So this didn't eliminate production of LSD. It mostly just forced it underground. Ironically, of all the people that defend LSD, the New York Times outright called the backlash a panic and criticized Sandoz for discontinuing it, which is funny given the coverage we see on screen right here.
Yes.
Which is, because I don't think I actually wrote it in the notes, for audio-only people, it's stuff basically comparing LSD to thalidomide, which caused birth defects, because it was like, I believe it was to suppress the kind of nausea that you feel during pregnancy. Yeah.
Thalidomide is, that should be an episode we do at some point. Someone remind me to put that on the spreadsheet at the end of the episode.
I gotcha.
That was a nasty thing.
Yeah. I knew somebody actually. One of my mom's friends was a thalidomide affected, individual, and her hands kind of looked like hooves. She was like a very intelligent and interesting person. That's just an example. So in 1966, the head of the FDA went on record stating that he disagreed with LSD's criminalization. But that year, the Bureau of Drug Abuse Control, a predecessor of the DEA, opened its files to reporters, and local police departments followed suit. The propaganda machine went brrr, and the moral panic intensified. This was the time that we got that rumor of LSD scrambling your chromosomes, which isn't true, but the damage was done. LSD was given the Schedule 1 status in 1970, meaning no medicinal or therapeutical value, no experimentation. Banning further research. Before I move past 1970, I want to at least bring up the Doc Ellis no-hitter, which...
Yes, please.
I mean, so the apocryphal story is that Doc Ellis, who was he a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates? I think that's
Yes,
okay.
he was.
Thank you. See, this is the value of having people in Philly. Allegedly, Doc Ellis, who was on a hell of a lot of drugs at the time, pitched a MLB no hitter while on acid. If you like ask the guy himself, he's actually not sure because he was on a lot of stuff, and it's kind of
a lot
maybe.
of stuff on the.
Yeah.
I had to do a specific combination of drugs to pitch a no hitter.
I mean, like I once rode my bike while like on a microdose, and I was like, I can see the ideal racing line. So I think it's kind of like feasible. But part of why it stuck around is because his name abbreviated is LSD. He's also become kind of a an anti-drug guy since. Which, I mean,
he doesn't want anyone else
dead.
to pitch a no hitter.
Well, it's a bit too late.
Yeah.
Although I guess he did curse Dave Steve. No. So there is this notion out there that LSD was banned as part of a targeted crackdown against anti-war efforts. And actually, until I researched this episode, I believe that. But it really just seems to be down to the moral panic. Jailing political dissidents would have only been a side benefit to the people who were pushing the crackdown. But that's not to say that LSD doesn't have its risks. Next slide. Yeah, seriously, do not fucking take blotter paper with Rick and Morty on it.
No.
Yeah, no,
it seems bad.
Looking at that, I'm like, what is that spiked with? Because you know who that's for.
I'm confused here. How does blotter paper work? Do you lick it or do you like?
Okay, so blotter paper, you get like somebody has a dropper and it's got a solution of LSD in it or something else. You don't actually know unless you test it, but we'll get to that because there's a whole last slide on that in a bit. But it's just a dropper with a sort of specified amount. You put the blotter paper in your mouth, and actually, it's better to swallow it, and we'll get to why.
Couldn't you put it on like a graham cracker or something? Then come on,
maybe, but like, what if there's something in the graham cracker that could interact with the LSD and neutralize the drug? I don't know that, but I believe that's one of the considerations. I've had it on a sweet tart before, which, I mean, it's not destroyed by stomach acid, so I could be entirely wrong. But anyway, LSD on its own is not a dangerous drug. Nobody has ever died from taking too much. There was one case of somebody taking 175 milligrams.
Oh, Jesus.
Which is about 1,000 times the dose that you would take for a significant trip. They ended up being okay. The symptoms were pretty bad, and I think they needed to be like monitored in the hospital for a while, but they were okay.
Physiologically fine. It's just the brain is working overtime.
Scrambled.
Yeah. I'd imagine you don't sleep for days on that kind of dose. But LSD, like marijuana, it can awaken latent mental illness. If you have a family history of schizophrenia, it might bring it on sooner than it would have otherwise manifested. Bad trips are real. They're preventable, but they do happen, and sometimes people's mental health suffers for a long time because of them. So much so that some people have committed suicide.
Wow.
There are some risky to unpleasant to downright bad combinations. Like LSD and weed together is not generally advised. They can both make you anxious, and that can just kind of potentiate. I once smoked a lot of weed on a day I was microdosing. It was not pleasant. All I can really characterize it as is kind of like mutant weed. And, some people are okay with the combo, but like I am prone to anxiety, so not for me. Also, you can die by accident if you take LSD with SSRI antidepressants. They can cause serotonin syndrome, which can be fatal. Another
You
way to
also
die.
die by doing something stupid while on LSD.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There are stories of people wandering into traffic and stuff.
Yeah.
The saying goes, set and setting, your mindset, and where you are. You have to be very careful about your environment when you take LSD. Another way you can hurt yourself is by not testing your drugs. Next slide. I'm half sure that there was another photo in there, but I could be wrong. No, I think there was.
Let me check. When I put this in PowerPoint, it sometimes does that. It's annoying.
It's just a picture of a molecule, so it's not crucial.
Oh.
But prohibition, as it does, brought about the rise of underground production and designer drug analogs. You wouldn't find people making as much fake acid if the real thing was legal. It's just a fact. Some of these include 1B LSD, ALD 52, something called ETHLAD, 1P LSD, which I have used. It has been found in a clinical trial to be indistinguishable. Some think it's a prodrug that becomes LSD in your body. Less potent, maybe less euphoric. So basically just dollar store acid. So some of these are legal in some places. Most of them seem to be as safe as LSD. But one of them isn't. 25I NBOME, also known as N-bomb. So
Oof,
never drop either of those.
Don't like that either.
It's often sold as LSD, but it's toxic. At least 19 people in the United States have died from it, and some more abroad. It's not as easily absorbed as LSD, so there's a saying, if it's bitter, it's a spitter. And that's why we mentioned earlier, if you do have blotter paper, swallow it. 25I NBOME is apparently destroyed in the stomach, so it just comes down to a safety precaution at that point. Of course, it's much better to just simply test your drugs. This slide has a picture of something called the Ehrlich reagent, which is a way of basically making sure that you're not getting NBOME. It doesn't tell you for sure that you're getting real acid. It doesn't tell you if you're getting acid or 1Z LSD or whatever, but it will tell you if it's unsafe. And it's generally recommended that you use multiple reagents to just be certain. And these days, sometimes it's even worthwhile to do fentanyl strip testing.
Yes. Everything's got fentanyl in it.
Yes.
They're going to put fentanyl in like fucking flour next.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I live in Portland, and fentanyl spiked in random shit is kind of a significant problem here. You don't have to get, to the point where you're tasting your tabs to see if they're unsafe. Just test your shit. The reagent kits are available online. Actually, funny enough, buying the Ehrlich reagent off of Amazon, which you can do, was how my dad found out I was doing acid. Because he's like, oh, what's this in purchase history? He Googled it, and he's like, oh, well, I guess he's getting around to what I did when I was young. Yeah, no, my dad told me trip stories, fortunately, when I became an adult, and they kind of made me interested, but still apprehensive. He has some really, I mean, the tricky thing with trip stories is that they're unbelievably profound and sometimes life-changing to go through, and they don't actually make for very good stories.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Most of them don't, although he did have okay, I do want to segue into two anecdotes. Neither of these are LSD. These are both mushrooms, but he did a fuck ton of mushrooms and rode a canoe down a river in Wisconsin with his brother.
That sounds like fun.
And they did so much that he sort of saw a rooster in the clouds just kind of leaning down and pecking at him. And also apparently he had this weird dialogue between his brain and his body of his body's going, okay, we're going to row to the shore because you're going to throw up. And his brain's going, no, I'm not. No, let's not do that. And the brain's going, nope, we're going over here. And sure enough, his body rowed to the shore on its own and he threw up. And on another, actually, no, the other anecdote's kind of too long to really go through because there's a lot of context and it's a little bit sad, but also just kind of one of those weird borderline spiritual experiences that makes you, so basically this shit can make you a little bit. There's a word called woke that we'll return to. I don't believe it's etymologically related to the word woke. I think they're completely different, but we'll kind of get into that. This is not the end of the story for LSD. Next slide. By 1980, nobody was clinically experimenting with LSD anywhere on the planet. But in the early 2000s, interest was starting to return with MRI and PET scanning helping us understand more about the brain. At this point, Albert Hofmann was still alive, and by all accounts, he was still in good shape mentally and physically until a heart attack at 102 years old, as Liam said earlier.
Wow.
He lived long enough to see the foundation for LSD's scientific comeback start again. In 2012, a meta-analysis found LSD significantly benefited alcoholics for up to 6 months, though the benefits tapered off by about a year. In 2014, a study found that LSD can improve the mental health of people undergoing treatment for life-threatening illnesses. A similar study has also found that hospice patients are less afraid or anxious of death after using mushrooms. In 2017, the University of Birmingham found in a study that psychedelic use correlated with reduced rates of criminal behavior, while conventional drugs were associated with increased rates. Multiple studies since 2017 have suggested a decrease in anxiety, including anxiety about death in terminal patients. There are also a few suggesting it may help with chronic pain, like rheumatoid arthritis or cluster headaches. There's a lot of interest in LSD's use in psychotherapy, in part because 2 studies since 2018 have shown it's a potent psychoplastogen. That increases neuroplasticity, basically the brain's ability to rewire itself. Anecdotally, I think all psychedelics are capable of this. I've had some experiences with LSD and its analogs that aren't clinical that I guess I'll touch on in a bit. We'll also need to talk about the downside about renewed interest in psychedelics. Next slide.
I mean, this is like the thing about like a lot of these the entire like drug scheduling system is just someone said nope, no clinical usage, and it's like, well, actually no, these things actually seem to be very effective in quite a lot of ways. It's just illegal to do research. Especially like psychedelics, which are some of the safest and least addictive drugs out there.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we can't have this because of fuck you.
There's probably a whole separate diatribe to go on to about why they're illegal, and yeah, I would probably get stuff wrong. But next, yeah. So I don't really know what to say here, but taking psychedelics do not make you smarter or a decent human being or enlightened or any of that shit. We say this because audio people, on screen is a picture of Aaron Rodgers, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, and that guy they call QAnon shaman from the January 6th insurrection. These are all dipshit psychedelic users. Elon Musk is allegedly a ketamine addict. I mean, sometimes people's egos just grow unchecked after they've done psychedelics. Some people who are traumatized find healing in them, and some people who don't really deserve the security they find, just remain comfortable. I think there's this sort of belief by this kind of person that they're counterculture. Doing psychedelics does not make you counterculture. There are leftists who do them. There are crazy right-wingers who do them like we see this. There are neoliberal rats who do them as well. I mean, Silicon Valley has always been a hotbed of psychedelic culture.
People like to do like the microdosing, and then they go to work, and then and it's like this increases productivity.
Find new ways to lay off 30,000 people. Yeah.
So actually, microdosing was on the docket for this slide. Microdosing, for those who aren't aware, is taking a very small sub-perceptual dose to increase focus or creativity, or as you said, productivity. There are some studies showing it doesn't work, and it's mainly that you're getting a placebo, but I kind of disagree. There is this regimen that people sometimes do of once every 3 days. Supposedly it's good for your mental health and for a bunch of other stuff in your life. I think that's too frequent, and I think that it can help you. But I think if you try to do it every 3 days or whatever, you are just going to make it ineffective. You're going to build a tolerance.
Feels like it's counter to the spirit of the thing.
It is. I write for a living, and there are times because this is a bonus episode. I've written about using psychedelics while writing about cars. I do not do drugs and drive, obviously, but there have been times where I think I have been more creative and a better writer because I have microdosed. But you can't force it every time.
It's like what Hemingway said: "Write drunk, edit sober."
I have that as a fucking magnet on my fridge. I think my dad bought it for me.
Nice.
Yeah, there's okay. So I mentioned the wook thing earlier. I don't actually know the etymology of it, but I believe it's completely unrelated to the word woke. But a wook is this kind of crunchy, weird, mystical person who, gets involved in psychedelics and starts, going kind of mystical, and, maybe it's kind of a hippie sort of thing. Maybe they talk about, like the natural way of things or all that. But there is a pipeline from that to kind of, reactionary right wing shit. I don't know if it's belief in like mysticism that connects them. It might also just kind of be a boomer thing, because I've known people who are like otherwise very, hippie crystal type people who are also like kind of far right. And unfortunately, I'm just sort of worried that like psychedelics will become associated with these kinds of people like we have on screen, or again, the neoliberals of Silicon Valley. It's like, are they doing damage anew to the reputation of this class of drugs? And I don't really have an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like everyone of certain generations sort of form this weird. It's California brain, is what it comes right down to. People get California brain, and then they're irrecoverable. It has nothing to do with the drugs. It has to do with living in a Mediterranean climate, and using enormous amounts of water at great expense to grow alfalfa. It has to do with I don't know, something about zoning. It's all zoning.
It's all zoning.
And preserving the character of your neighborhood.
You've never seen a 2-story building because you live in Palo Alto. You microdose LSD. You go to your software job and
you make $9 million stripping the earth of its resources.
Yeah, but you still can't afford your house.
Yeah, you live in a pod.
Yeah.
You live in like one of those illegal like double bunk capsule house things.
Oh, those things, yeah.
Which some, obviously are against zoning code.
You live in a illegal flop house.
So next slide. And this is the last slide. We've gotten here way faster than I thought. So this is just kind of what's LSD actually like? And I guess I'll put it to the panel. Who here has actually done or is willing to admit to actually doing LSD?
Hello.
Hi.
I've only done mushrooms. I've never done LSD.
So the preamble is going to be psychedelics are highly suggestible. Everyone reacts differently. Experiences can be completely different each time you dose. Described as ineffable. LSD, however,
past returns are not indicative of future performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, LSD is widely considered one of the more predictable ones. Like you take it one time and you probably know how you're going to react the next time. So I'm going to kind of just invite an open thing about like what the experience is like. I guess that's going to sort of be between me and Liam. So like when I dose, it usually takes about 20 minutes or so before I just kind of start feeling a little weird.
Mhm.
these edibles ain't shit moment.
Yeah. It's been a long time
Yeah.
since I have used LSD. I used LSD last in college.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm many years out of
I
college.
haven't touched it in 2.5 years plus now at this point because I just haven't felt the need, and that's very common when you have psychedelic trips. Instead of again like a beer, you're like, oh, that was fun. I'm going to do that again tomorrow night.
No, you feel sated.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, no, I'm good. Which is part of why the whole Schedule 1 and addiction thing is bullshit because uh, I also last did mushrooms like 9 months ago, and I'm only starting to consider it again.
Yeah, that was also my experience with mushrooms. Is like, well, I've had them. I don't need them again for a long time.
Yeah. I will say I was in a location where the aurora was visible last night, and I did take a pen with a certain substance in it up there that was not weed, and watching the aurora with my entire soul was a very deeply felt experience. But anyway,
Sky was just gray here.
yeah, no, actually, all I was like, I went outside at like 10:30 at night after watching Twister. And I was like, there's just a lot of light pollution, isn't there? Because I don't see shit. And then I was like, wait, there's a lot more light pollution than normal, right? And it turned out just the aurora was fucking everywhere. And it was pretty faint, but it came through great on like phone camera.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to what it's like to take acid. Yeah, like when I say a bit strange, it's because it's really hard to put your finger on, but like it's this sort of feeling of it's somewhere between apprehension and excitement. It's kind of like what you feel like at the top
When you've been waiting for like a movie all day.
yeah, or like what I have.
This better not suck.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it than what I wrote, which is like when you're at the top of a roller coaster and about to go down. Yeah, no, it's more like what you said. I get this flickering around the edges of my vision, and there's like this weird ticklish feeling, like that's often like in my cheek muscles and in my brain.
Yep.
And like the only thing you can do about it is smile. Because at this point you're just sort of like, holy shit, it's going on. Maybe an hour in or so. It's been a while, so I don't actually remember. I might start to get my visuals if I'm on a dose enough for that. One of the first things I notice is like like a swimming pool with nobody in it. Like it does that sort of faint wavering thing.
Right.
The floor will do that. And it's pretty cool.
Well, you should get someone to look at that.
Yeah, it's water damage.
Yeah.
Well, it's landlord's problem, not mine.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Fuck them.
Yeah, like eventually, like things around you will like have these geometric fractal patterns that might kind of like flow into each other. You might get some like false colors. This does some fucked up stuff to faces. And like again, because like you feel like your brain's being tickled. This is all very funny.
I would probably start yelling at stuff. Not in like a I would be like, well, that's not practical. What the fuck are you doing?
You just looking at a bridge going, this is not OSHA.
Yeah, or like a fucking like a fucking dresser. I'd be like, you can't open this. There's a fractal in the way.
See, now I think somebody should find a way to give you access to acid. No, that'd be very funny. Just like, okay, bonus episode is like everybody on Well, There's Your Problem does acid and like just records for 12 hours and you guys just have a highlight reel.
That would be extremely funny, and I feel like I don't know we'd somehow wind up in prison for it.
We would.
Well, no. All you have to do is say, "We are not doing acid in Minecraft" as the the title.
Yeah, that would work flawlessly. Yes.
I mentioned faces. Don't look in the mirror. Some people say do look in the mirror.
No, don't do it.
I did, and like I saw how much of like my grandfather's genes I got. Like I spotted a bunch of facial features that I never had before, and it was kind of unsettling. I think, unfortunately, I have kind of a high tolerance. I have not experienced ego death through acid, even on 500 micrograms of 1 PLSD. Some people do on just like 100. I did once depersonalize on mushrooms, and it was like, it's like the not fun version of ego death, I guess. Not that ego death is fun. Some people find it pretty unpleasant, but like, it's just kind of like this, I don't have access to what I consider myself. Yeah, it's not that interesting. It's not a fun way to be at a party. In all, I mean, like the peak lasts like it's a few hours, like 2 to 4, depending on the dose, maybe. But the come down takes a really long time. The last time I did it, I think I dosed at like 9 a.m. And I wasn't able to sleep until like 3 a.m. And actually, all the photos on the slide right now are from that day, except for the screen cap in the top right. Somebody else took that, but it was like 1 a.m. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go play the library in Halo Combat Evolved because I feel like it, which is funny because like that's one of the most hated missions in the series. Also, like that's like Eritrean food. I don't even know what that is. But I chose a weirdly porous food to eat that day.
That's what I was like, yeah, this looks like, I thought it was Ethiopia. I think they're very similar cuisines, Ethiopian, Eritrean, yeah.
Yeah, it was like Eritrea / Ethiopian cuisine. And I built the entire Lego Saturn V, which is like, I don't know.
Well done.
This horrible Schedule 1 drug that makes you play with Lego and eat delicious Eritrean food.
And play Halo, yeah.
Yeah, and play Halo.
Yeah, like I ended up like staying up to like 3 a.m. I think I found the meaning of life, which sounds arrogant as fuck, but it's also like really like underwhelming. So I know that's a very funny sentence, isn't it? It's like, oh, the meaning of life is so underwhelming.
Yeah, I was playing with Lego. I mean,
actually,
thank God for the Danes.
Yeah, kind of. Because I mean, like the reason why we continue to live boils down to us either kind of just doing shit for the sake of doing it, or like sitting there and going, "Damn, look at that."
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that's how I think of it.
yeah, it's about right. So just like life is just about vibing.
It's true.
The come down also puts you in this really interesting headspace that I would kind of describe as peeling back the layers of abstraction from the world.
Like an ogre.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. The Shrek references are just kind of bookending the podcast. I've been able to get some useful perspective on like the way I have been living my life. At that time of my last acid trip, I was sort of not letting myself enjoy things because I felt like I wasn't doing enough, not being productive enough, not being really on top of my life. And then I was like, no, actually, I'm allowed to enjoy being alive.
Yeah.
And a couple of years previous, my first ever acid trip made me, it kind of synthesized what I had learned in an ethics class in community college, which was taught by an anthropology professor. So, it was very grounded in like the real world. And so I had this understanding of like the ways I am connected to, people across the world and how fragile and exploitative like my standard of living was. And funny enough, a combination of acid and, an ethics class were what moved my politics way to the left, because I was probably a lib before that. Yeah, I mean, this is the last slide. My sort of take on psychedelics as a whole is that they have the potential to do good for people. They have the potential to do harm. You need to know, you have to treat them carefully. You have to go into them with a sort of intent, but you also need to be able to go with the flow and not try to hold on to the experience. You just sometimes have to surrender to it and accept that you're on the ride.
Got to use recreational drugs responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, you do have to do that.
Yeah, believe it or not. You can't, like with microdosing, I think personally that it can have an effect, but it's not coffee and you can't treat it like it. You can't do it all the time and expect it to have an effect. And again, psychedelics are not something you want to do all the time or even often. Like,
Well, this is the thing that really always got me about this is the psychedelics are not like addictive in the way that other recreational drugs are. You do it once and you're like, well, I don't need to do that for a long time.
yeah,
Um,
for the most
some people
part.
do use them quite a lot, but it's not like, as far as I know, the same like physiological addiction that like say alcohol is,
Yeah.
or
Right.
heroin, or
Yeah,
Pick your poison,
like
right?
a psychological addiction, you might say, which sometimes has been associated with weed, and I think is a possibility with ketamine. I mean, I've also been through like clinical ketamine therapy, and I have sometimes noticed there is this phenomena, and I don't know if there's much clinical literature on it, but sometimes people will sort of they will think of the drug as being the ticket to change in their life. And if you are approaching it like, oh, the drug is going to fix everything, you're not taking accountability. And taking the drug will show you, again, that you're not taking accountability. And it'll just kind of be a harsh wake up. Because in general, and this is not completely accurate, but I would say instead of suppressing reality and kind of making it fit a more comfortable mold, the way, say, alcohol might, um, psychedelics can sort of intensify reality. And so the things that you're trying not to think about will just become more obvious. Um, Again, like I did more mushrooms than I ever had in my life once while at like this warehouse party where I knew nobody. And I went from alone with my thoughts in public to alone with my thoughts in public in HD, which was not fun. Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, that's the advice. It's set and setting, as they say. Take care of
Correct.
your attitude going into it, and take care of where you are, who you're with, and you'll maximize your chances at having a good experience.
So anyway, kids, don't do drugs.
Or be responsible,
Yeah,
at
and
least.
if you are a kid listening to this, how did you get your parents' credit card?
Give us your parents' credit card.
Exactly. It's on the numbers are on the back now. You can send them in, write them in the comments. Don't forget the don't forget the little three number code.
They've probably already used that credit card if they're listening to this. If not, I mean, that's piracy, and piracy is not a victimless crime, as we all know from those DVD PSAs.
That's a good point. That's a good point. It's not like you can just go into the unlisted YouTube website and just find all our bonus episodes immediately. Yeah.
Man, shut up.
I thought this was going to be way longer. Like the episode notes on this were like 60% longer than the Plowshare episode, and this one's coming out to half the length.
I was about to say,
That's okay.
well, such is what happens when November is indisposed owing to a
November.
Trash Future bonus live show, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Devin, just edit in November's reactions. Okay, I need to get that right.
Just have a virtual
November's reactions.
We need November VTuber in the corner.
Yeah,
the whole way.
Live react to us. Yeah,
there was an invitation extended to Victoria, but it was on such short notice on my part, that it's not her fault for not seeing my text.
Don't worry about it.
There was a fucking aurora last night, and everybody was looking at it.
Everyone was up way late.
Yeah.
I thought there was going to be a Carrington event. I was like looking for the fire extinguishers.
You are amazing.
Yeah.
All right. We good?
Yeah, I think that was a bonus episode.
All right. Thanks, James, for coming on. If the people want more James, do you want them to find more James?
Sure. Instagram, James Gilboy. Nobody goes to that Twitter website, whatever the fuck they call it these days. I mean, you can follow me there, but I'm a bad poster. You won't be entertained.
I'm gonna have to.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to like record like a voiceover for the for the bonus episode preview because the algorithm is going to hate this so much.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
good. That's why it's a bonus
All right.
episode.
That's true.
Well, that's a bonus episode.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks.
Guys.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning.
It's 10:30.
Good boy.
Yes. All right. That was a podcast. Boom. Done.